skills. It's also foundational skills. And there are today over 800,000 adults in Connecticut without the kind of, traditional degrees or certificates experience that, we need to really help get skilled. And we unfortunately also have a lot of people retiring. So this is all kind of contributing, to the labor shortage. In terms of what we've done over the last couple of years, we've established a really strong foundation. Maybe kind of, Marty, you might want to just talk to what the regional sector partnerships are and kind of the range of work that we're kind of engaged in right now, and the opportunities as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. The regional sector partnerships was one of the key foundational elements that came out of the business leadership track or the industry leadership track. And what it was, in essence, was a forum created where the employers could articulate what exactly they were looking for, what exactly they needed, and other stakeholders in those meetings were academics or people in the nonprofit or public sectors. So the conversations really turned into a multi-directional kind of a learning process to figure out what exactly are people looking for and how to accomplish that. A lot of employers also don't know exactly what they're looking for. So we learned a lot of things in those regional sector partnerships. And I think one of the other difficult moments in large organizations, which a lot of you are from, is that there are so many different people in your organization involved in so many different things. It's tough for one person representing that to really articulate everything. So what we're finding is that we need to get more people involved from organizations into these partnerships. But they were set up, 5 in manufacturing, spread throughout the state, 2 in IT, one is in the Hartford area, one's in Stamford, a bioscience in New Haven, and 3 healthcare dispersed. But the first job is to really try and articulate the KSAs and knowledge, skills, and abilities needed by business, and the hiring demand. And of course, for each organization, the hiring demand goes through an ebb and flow. But when you put together a whole group of employers, we start to get maybe much more linear demand, which is easier to make commitments from the educators and colleges and universities. So it's been a good process. Mark, I could go in a lot of detail here. I think a lot of people on this group have a good understanding of it. One reflection I had sitting through the meeting today is that as a group, we have to solve for, and we did speak about labor force participation, and we spoke about figuring out how to bring down barriers or create more inclusion, and all these things are really primary. But in doing all of these things, we have to make sure that we build an environment that's really competitive also. So we're competing against other states, we're competing against other countries for the business that we drive, and we have to solve for a sustainable model that makes sure that we're competitive. So the ability to learn is going to be one of those key drivers. The ability to bring people in that don't go through a formal process of education, maybe an informal process. That's what skilling is all about. It is formal, but it's in much smaller bites. So I put that out as a reflection that we have to make sure that we maintain competitive on the regional and national and global scale.
Great points. Tracy, you want to move us ahead to the questions for this breakout group? And Marty, you want to kind of lead the way and kind of asking?
Sure. So we have the focus, and this was in the business leadership slide that Kelly had read through about 30 minutes ago, which is the 100,000 open jobs. So we need a system that fills those jobs, but a system that's constantly meeting demand, job opening demand. Because if we don't fill the jobs here, somebody else is going to have a system that fills the job. So, what are people's feelings about the direction of the strategic plan? There was that 5 bullet point compact. Do we want to look at that again, Mark?
Sure, or just maybe here, just open up for general reactions to the direction of the strategic plan. You know, what concerns do you have? Are there things that you would change, or are there missing elements? And maybe, Tracy, we could just pull down this page for a second so we can all see one another, make it easier to have a discussion. Any questions? Or any thoughts on this?
Rich Jacob.
Yeah, Marty, I joined this group because you were here.
Listen, I'm going to tell my astrologer that you've been kind to me today.
Okay, and since Kelly and Mark encouraged us to go outside of our sector and outside of our comfort zone, I also joined this one. But so Rich Jacob from Yale, and I guess I thought that the pillars, the strategic direct plan in general made a lot of sense. I do wonder whether the plan is focused very heavily on sort of middle skill jobs, and whether we're thinking of this also as a strategy for both ensuring that we have sort of the management talent, especially for startups, and I'm not saying this is a revision of the plan, but I would hope that it would sort of also recognize the role that for agencies like CT Next are doing of trying to also create new industries. If I look at New Haven, where the bioscience sector didn't exist 20 years ago, and over the next 10 years, we might have a new sector in quantum technologies, how we think about training the people who can innovate and create new industries, and then also be creating demand that follows behind that. So just a kind of a general comment.
Great point, Rich. We can't be looking at this through the lens of yesterday. You know, we really have to support kind of the innovation and the emerging kind of opportunities. By the way, one of the Career Connect programs is in biotech, and seems to be, at least kind of early indications, very, popular, and it's an area that I think we should really kind of focus in on. I noticed that in Boston, they just initiated a program of kind of training 1,000 entry-level people in the biotech arena. So, I think there's kind of strong interest in that. Marianne?
Hi, yes, Marianne Haley. People know me as Mimi as well, National Youth Employment Coalition. Nice to be here. I also came to a breakout group that I wouldn't necessarily normally jump into. I'm coming off of the U.S. Conference of Mayors last week and into this week, and there were so many great ideas that were there. I know Mayor Bronin was there, and probably some other Connecticut mayors, but I'm just wondering a few things. One is, just from the perspective of thinking about opportunity youth and those young people that are not connected to schools or work, then how are we that I didn't see anything in the plan about the disconnected youth, and that is the focus. I'm also chair of the youth DEI subcommittee. So I just wanted to make sure that we're connecting the dots between the committees, because there's been a lot of really great work and great thinking around some ways that we can do a better job of connecting our community-based organizations and our young people to industry and career opportunities. So I think it would just be great to be more explicit about that, I guess. Also, I would just add in reentry as well. One of my questions was with Career Connect, where are we advertising this? Where is the marketing strategies? Are we actively recruiting from our reentry population even prior to release? Because I think that there's a great pool of people to draw from that are often overlooked and have barriers, but could be excellent candidates for some of these training and career opportunities, as well as our disconnected young people. So like, for instance, the sharing the data skills map with schools, I think it would be great to be able to share those with the community-based organizations, especially where those industries are based, and to really have that employer CBO connection strengthened, so that the employers are actively coming to the community-based organizations that are working with those populations that have been more marginalized. As far as childcare, this is just an idea that I know I'm saying a lot. I always probably talk too much. But in terms of childcare, just thinking about childcare, one of the ideas that came out of it was actually the mayor of Austin that I was talking to, and he said, when industries want to, come here, or we have industries that are here, what he is thinking about doing is taking a percentage of what they give back to communities and putting that into a childcare fund for the community. And I don't know if that could help solve problems, or if somebody's already working on that, but that would be phenomenal. And I think that, talking about attracting industry to the States, I was a single mom and struggled mightily with trying to figure out childcare when my daughter was younger. And that could be a game changer, I think, in so many different ways, and also be able to attract women who have been out of the workforce, because it's just not worth it, back into the workforce. So I know you probably have been grappling with that, but I would love to see something more explicit around childcare and what we're doing around that.
Thank you very much. I mean, there is, by the way, just for everybody's, now the governor set up in February a blue ribbon panel on childcare and early childhood education, made up of leaders across sectors, to put together a 5-year plan for the state on childcare and early childhood education. That's going to be very workforce connected, just FYI. So that with that, I'd like to kind of call on Alice.
Thank you, Mark. Alice Pritchard, Department of Administrative Services, Workforce Director. I want to raise a concern that I'm stumbling upon already a month into my new job about the skills-based hiring, which on its surface sounds really good, because it doesn't focus as much on degree-based hiring potentially. But I am concerned that what I'm hearing is that we're happy to hire on skills, but they need experience. And one of the challenges we have in having new entrants to the workforce or career changers is that it's very difficult for them to get experience with their new credentials and their new skills. And so I think we've got to think about, how do we provide experience? Do we have more apprenticeship type programs or trainee type opportunities? But again, if all we've done for folks is you don't have to have a degree, but you have to have 5 years of experience, we've continued to create the barrier to entrance. So just want to think about, how do we provide opportunities for experience? And it may be that we need to, in this case, really think about ourselves as an ecosystem, because I know people are frustrated that they train folks and then they jump sectors or they jump to a different company. But we're all going to have to do that in order to bring the next generation of workers into these roles. So just want to add that to the discussion of skills-based training.
It's a great point, Alice. Yeah, it's a really great point. And in fact, it's come up in the tech RSPs of companies basically giving that same feedback, Alice, that you've heard, with state government, which is that they don't only want to see people with, completing a particular certificate, evidencing skills, but also having some experience. So that does point to kind of creating, programs that provide that kind of experience, whether it's internships or different forms of apprentices, whatever. Mark?
Hi, thanks very much, Mark. Appreciate you giving me the time. I'm actually following up on a couple of things. Rich, Jacob, your comments were, I think, very appropriate. And actually, the governor said something I thought was fascinating. He said, you can't have opportunity without growth. And I think one of the challenges that I see and am experiencing is, how do we get people to want to move to Connecticut for jobs? I think what the Workforce Council has done, essentially employing people that are already here, is a top priority. But if we're going to have long-term growth here in Connecticut, I'd love to see us attracting people from outside of Connecticut to want to move here because it's a great place to have a career. And I think that's a great way to get people to want to start businesses, to expand businesses here or start them. We're close enough to New York and Massachusetts that there's access to talent there. I think we can be cost competitive with those sorts of geographies. And I would hope that part of the Workforce Council would be a way to say, how do we attract people and businesses, make Connecticut a preferred destination for businesses and workers? And I've not seen that, and I'd love to help, if we can, to shine a spotlight on what Connecticut has to offer. And as the expression says, fishermen go where the fish are. And if we can have a great workforce here, we're going to find people want to put businesses and expand their businesses here. So I'd love to talk to people offline. Reach out to me. I'd love to talk to people about how to do that and participate in any way we can to grow the Connecticut economy over the next number of decades.
Thanks, Mark. Rick, I know you've had your hand up.
Thanks, Mark. Enrique put in the chat a while ago that we have a bias to support innovation, but then production moves offshore because of low cost and low skill. Of those 800,000 folks, how many fit that particular category of low skill, that if we create different training programs that begin in school with career and technical education, we have some opportunity to accomplish some of the things that have already been talked about here, with giving experience to that particular workforce that's being untapped today. Another piece that I think is missing from the strategic plan are the 78,000 kids that are graduating from special education in our system in the next 5 years. And how are we integrating that specific disability community, given their advanced technological access that they've had in education? And again, how do we link that to career and technical education so that we're creating a different workforce that may be able to address that particular concern that Enrique highlighted? Thanks.
Great point. Thank you. Taniqua?
Hello, Taniqua Hughley, Director of Economic Mobility Initiatives at the United Way of Central Northeastern Connecticut. I just wanted to take the time to echo what Marianne said. Much of what she said was some of the things I wanted to bring up. So thank you for that, Marianne, especially when it comes to engaging re-entry and opportunity youth. In addition to that, I think it's important that we also start thinking about how to, we have to be creative on how we engage employers as well. And we can't only talk about how we can prepare the youth, young adults who are going to land these jobs, but we also have to talk about how we can be supportive of employers as well. As we know, many of the employers kind of function of how they've been functioning for the past 50 years or so, right? And so just figuring out how we can have those conversations, similar to the gentleman who was just talking before me. How can we talk to them about the needs of the folks that they may be getting, whether it's mental health, or how can we update them on the status of neighborhoods in the state of Connecticut as well. So I think we just have to be strategic and creative on updating employers and just engaging employers, because I think also a lot of this goes to outreach, right? How are they getting youth and young adults from different backgrounds to participate in, or excuse me, to land a job in their career field? So that's the only thing I think that we should add is just really thinking about how we're creating employment relationships as well.
That's great.
Hey,
Thank you.
Mark, could I just follow up real quickly on Tanika's comments? I think they're perfect. And I think one of the things that we have to solve for, and George Anderson brought it up in the earlier session with supports on wraparound services, is that some of these things are really hard to do. And if we don't solve for all of these interdependencies, it's hard for the employer to solve for those on their own. And if you're a hiring manager in a fast-paced, low-resourced company, you're going to take the path of least resistance. So we've got to somehow find a way to build packages or build things that, if we're teaching skill sets, to Alice Pritchard's point, and people need experience, we have to package that up as one thing. So when people come present themselves to the job market, it's done. Every employer cannot manage all these things. The bigger ones can, but I think we need to try and figure out if we can make things easier and package these things so they can hit the easy button and people get hired.
It's a great point, Marty. I wanted to kind of ask people about the kind of compact commitments, that we talked about a little bit earlier in terms of industry. So this is kind of a question almost to employers about kind of what their reaction is to the items that we just talked about. We heard a little bit about skills-based hiring from Alice and others, but looking at more high-quality jobs, creating opportunities for more mobility and pathways for existing employees, working more actively with high schools and colleges on providing work-based learning. What do some employers here kind of think about that?
Mark, I could comment on behalf of the National Fund for Workforce Solutions. We are toying with the notion of having an accreditation for job quality, which is there is a certain number of variables that you should check the boxes in order to claim to be an employer, either in compliance or aspiring to meet certain standards.
Okay. So, and maybe that's something the state could kind of, help out in also. Natasha?
Hi, yes, Natasha Harris with CT Next, Workforce Development Manager. One of the things two of the programs that we operate are the Talent Bridge program, which provides funding for startups to host interns. And we work with the college and university system through the Connecticut Career Consortium to match the students to have those opportunities. We've found great success in that. Our demographic is pretty niche in terms of it being the startup community, but we've had about 70% hiring rate through those internship opportunities, and scholars can do those in both their junior and senior year in college. And then we also operate the Governor's Innovation Fellowship, which matches recently graduated scholars to full-time employment at various organizations or businesses throughout the state. Some of the challenge that we're finding in the Governor's Innovation Fellowship is matching them. And these are scholars who are like top tier candidates in their respective fields. So I don't know what we can do better to connect the business community to understand that these are scholars who want to stay in the state. They want to have opportunities, but they're having a challenge with finding them.
Okay. Really good point. And I've also noted some really good points in the chat line. Michael Nagel from the EWIB basically talking about we need to provide training for employers on skills-based hiring. And the point in here about Tanika talking about kind of it's not just getting in the door, it's also providing employer assistance, assistance to employees once they are hired to enable them, help them succeed. And Rick's comment about kind of the fact that in the compact itself, that third bullet point needs some additions to it. So want to go to Rich Jacob next?
Thanks, Mark. So just commenting from the perspective of Yale as an employer, we are the largest employer in the city of New Haven. So I think these commitments look pretty good. I'd like to take them back to human resources. I think we're probably doing some of this, and certainly it's consistent with the spirit of where we're trying to go with working with partners in New Haven to increase the pipeline coming into Yale.
That's great, Rich. That's encouraging. You guys being the largest private employer in the state. The distinguished Garrett Moran.
City, not state, city.
Yeah, in the city, right. Well, no, I think, I mean, if you add up Yale and Yale New Haven Health, I think you guys are probably the top private sector employer. Garrett Moran, former GWC chair.
Hello, everybody. Mark, I'm thinking as I listen to the answers and the questions, for companies to respond to the expectations that are set forth, they need a way to do it and a how and something that's specific so that they can, offer something other than just a broad commitment. And it seems like the regional sector partnership device is a good way to do that. I don't know how many of our companies end up being embraced by the partnerships that have been set up so far, but theoretically, that's an environment where you can sit with competitors and service providers and educators and really solve problems. And in that environment, people who have a mutual sort of ecosystem involvement can look each other in the eye and make commitments and really get things done. What do the folks in this group that are particularly the employers or anybody who's participated feel about the progress that has been made using that device or not? Are the expectations too high for them? I'm just curious to get reactions.
Answers to Garrett's question about the progress within the regional sector partnership so far?
I can comment. We sponsor 3 RSPs, and what we find is that the environment we're dealing with problems that are dynamic in nature that need a long sort of development and implementation time cycles, and the RSPs are often stuck in the here and now. So they're basically have a mindset of instant gratification. So we need to create some platform for them to look at the longer term picture because they don't seem to be doing it on their own.
Thank you. I see Michael Nagel's hand raised.
Yeah, so Eastern Connecticut Workforce Investment Board, we coordinate the 2 RSPs in the Eastern region, and I do see the RSPs as kind of natural vehicles to talk with employers about good jobs and job quality. I'm curious, I know, most of the employers probably in this call are much larger, but any, I guess, advice for facilitating those conversations in a way that doesn't put the employers on the defensive, in terms of the implication that, hey, we want to talk about creating good jobs as, that the jobs right now are not good jobs or quality jobs.
Any thoughts on Michael's question?
I don't know if I'm going to answer Michael's question, but I might. I think one of the gaps we have, Garrett, is that when you're on the regional sector partnership, we have the companies represented. We have the voice of the companies, the voice of all the players. But I don't know how well we're hardwiring those back to the companies or the industries. And I think Rich Jacobs just talked about this with, going back with these list of these compacts. I mean, I think we have so many hiring managers in our company. And I think if we're going to get scale, it's not just having representation, it's really trying to backwards engage some really easy things back into the company so they know exactly how to deal with skills-based hiring, or how to deal with wraparound services,
Right.
or how to deal with second chance offerings. And I don't think we train people how to talk to their company about these new things that we're trying to rewire in the HR process.
I mean, you kind of said two things, Marty, that I thought were really interesting. One is, how do we scale, even within companies? Because we know that diversifying talent is not, you can't just talk to one person. You need senior leadership engaged, but it really needs to permeate throughout the organization. So what's the best way of doing that? What are the strategies for doing that?
I learned this. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
No. I was just going to say, and then your second point was, how do we kind of create tools or, ways to make the whole kind of process easier? And one example I would use on that, Marty, which you're very familiar with, coming out of one of your RSPs in the tech world is, Ryan Oak's work on creating this 1-year kind of apprenticeship program with Accenture, which he's said he's going to open source it, meaning he's going to share that with other companies.
I'm gonna give an example, and it's a big example, so it may be an outlier, but when you have Hartford Hospital and you have Jeff Flax or Orlando that's representing that hospital on the GWC or in the RSP, they have 3,000 open jobs. Are we able to bring something back that can scale back inside of that organization in terms of them clearly understanding what the ask is here, what the pivots are, where the resources are, where the opportunities are? And I'm not sure we're getting scale back from representation into the front line to activate the scale fast enough.
Marty, if you're talking about changes in the way people do business, like skills-based hiring, like thinking about how to solve problems that only frontline people are going to be able to solve, like how do we deal with early childhood? I think, in my experience, it requires the CEO to sort of give their team a clear message and to give them permission to innovate and to rally. And then maybe in our context, it requires our governor to say to the big CEOs in the state, here's what we're trying to accomplish, and it's not going to work if you don't get involved. For example, if you think about early pathways for high school students to get credit to get into work, it doesn't work without the Department of Education, CSCU, and OWS reaching out to the companies. But it also doesn't work without the CEO at a company saying, we need to figure out how to create summer jobs for the local high school students in this community.
Right.
You can't just have someone say, go create 20. You've got to have the leadership say, we've got to do something different and get creative. And so maybe what we've done is we've set up an RSP infrastructure and not taken it to that next level. You can't give a CEO/governor mandate on this stuff unless you're organized to pursue it. And the RSP theoretically over time should be in a position to be able to do that. But anyway.
Right. I think you articulated what I was thinking. And even when the CEO says we're going to do it, you still have people inside of the company who block, and you have to, it's so important we're changing paradigms and cultures here, and we need to do it with an army. We can't do it with a representative.
Right.
Yeah. So that I've been thinking about that a lot, which is what's the engagement process with companies, which is really the issue we're talking about. And your point, the last point you just made, it takes more than one or two people. It takes kind of an army to kind of really engage with companies at the scale we're talking about. I think is a real challenge that, this plan that we're going to put together should try to solve for. How do we engage, with companies? I agree with Garrett's point. It's got to start at the top, but it's got to go, building on that. There's a lot of engagement that's going to need to happen at multiple levels in these companies. We know some.
If you could figure out how to give a really clear message to companies about our expectations for work-based learning opportunities and for skills-based hiring, just to take two, which are new and different and would be systematic, then you'd be able to go to the governor and the CEOs and say, here's what we don't want to do. The question to me is, are we ready to execute? Do we know exactly what we want? And would we be ready to execute if we got a real mandate from up top, both within the companies and the state?
It's a fair
Gotta be
question.
shrink wrap, easy package solution that we create and we serve it up. Easy button.
Yeah,
Really
but
complex.
think about like skills-based hiring, work-based learning, both are going to be really different depending on the industry and the kinds of companies. And that's why these collectives are so essential.